Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the PVP podcast where we talk about real estate, business, and everything in between. And today I have Kevin Stoffman with me. And Kevin is a former banker turned software executive, and he's also an investor. And we wanted to have a little chat today on his story and who exactly he is and where he came from. So, Kevin, welcome to the show. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Yeah, excited to be on.
Yeah. So for our listeners who might not know you, give us a little inside scoop of who you are and where you came from.
Yeah, a couple decades now in real estate, at least indirectly. Started at Morgan Stanley as a grunt analyst doing research on real estate deals. Spent a handful of years there, then got an MBA. When I was in grad school, that's when the financial crisis happened. So, Lehman crash, Bear went bankrupt, all that. So clearly my former team, there wasn't going to be spots when I graduated. So I had to pivot, ended up going to a big four to do some real estate consulting. Most of it was focused on technology because at the time, real estate was in the dumps, transactions weren't happening. All these owners were trying to improve operations so that with NOI improvement, they had a better chance of transactions later. So I thought I would do it for a year, ended up doing it for almost 9 years across 3 firms.
Nice.
And I got by formerly pulling teeth, but now falling in love with technology and the intersection of real estate. When I was at Deloitte, a handful of years later, I was in charge of evaluating all of the new technology companies that were being introduced in the space that our clients might leverage. And then happened to be really excited about one of them and became their COO back in 2019. And so now I'm, now 7 years in the, technology and software world for real estate.
Mm-hmm.
As you can imagine, having access to that kind of tech and having access to a bunch of proprietary data, I thought, why shouldn't I be, putting my money where my mouth is? And started buying a little bit of real estate, both as GP with a couple partners and mainly as LP with some friends in some funds. And now here we are 7 years later, and I have not an amazing size portfolio, but a portfolio that's growing to a size where I hope that can become my full-time thing shortly.
Amazing. And and you have a background in banking, right?
Yeah.
Former banker. So and then how did you switch from the banking world to essentially like real estate consulting for companies like Deloitte that you mentioned?
Yeah, the advantage to being in grad school is you have the rare right to reinvent yourself and pivot without a lot of people asking a lot of questions. Right? You go back, you do the specialization, you join all these clubs, you do internships while in grad school, and you get this time gap and this permission to look at other possibilities. Now, if my old team at Morgan Stanley had called me back and be like, hey, that VP slot you were hoping for, it's open. Like I would have taken it. But like those were not happening. This was May of 2010 when I got out. So just getting a job in real estate was like a win. And it was interesting when I joined EY, at the time it was still called Ernst & Young. When you join as a senior consultant, you're not allowed to choose your industry. You can say, here's my previous experience, here's where I'm going to add the most value, but like they're going to put you where the billable projects are. Mm-hmm. And so that first year, like I did work for a healthcare company, I did work for a manufacturing company, I did work for an aviation and logistics company, and it was fine. It paid the bills. I got to experience a handful of cities I hadn't been to before.
Yeah,
it wasn't until the summer of 2011 that I got put back on a real estate project and fell back in love with real estate. And I was like, yeah, this is where I belong. And when you're passionate about something, you work harder, you care more, you outperform. And it was very clear to them that I got on that project and they said, oh, okay, this is where we need him to be. He's crushing it here. He was fine over there, right? It's like that like C+ grade going to an A+.
Yeah.
And so got back into real estate. And when you're meeting with all these companies, whether they're capital allocators or on the ground general partners or property managers or brokerage firms, they're all dealing with a similar host of problems, some of which can be solved by technology and a lot of which are just solved by changing people and process.
Yeah. And technology is like, it's ever evolving, and it's like, and I wish I could say like 1 year to the next, but lately it's been like 1 day to the next. Just like AI, the way it's evolved in the last 5 years since they originally announced, ChatGPT and all these certain things, right? Programs. the way AI has evolved, and technology, I think is something that, I think back 20, when you said you started your career, and I think about the technology then versus the technology
Yeah.
now. And then I go even further back to 30 years. And then, even like in the real estate space, I started off as a real estate broker, but back in the day, there was no digital marketing, 30 years ago. There was no, it was all flyers and handouts and phone calls and kiosks. And today it's the reverse. Like nobody does flyers and handouts and kiosks anymore. It's all digital. Right. So, and so like,
It's almost come back around full circle, uh,
right.
to where if you do something purely analog and very obviously analog and targeted and focused toward your audience, they notice it more because it's so different. Sometimes the answer is just when you're doing something front facing, being a little unique and a little different. And that's regardless of whether you're, pitching a look and lease to a regular tenant looking at an apartment complex versus working with a brand and representing them to get them in a retail space, or trying to convince a growing company to take up office space where they've totally been remote before, or convincing an e-commerce company that, yeah, they could get away with some robots inside of a warehouse and not actually need to see the product being sorted and shifted. It's like this, it's not just the technology, it's people's changing comfort with it. So you talked about AI. Like, I found the most benefit for AI in back office that nobody really sees, but that front office shaking hands, face to face stuff still matters.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think that technology it helps automate what's time consuming, but not necessarily a money making task.
Yeah.
So like phone calls and management and email management and like drafting clauses and, before like I'm huge on this, but before ChatGPT and AI, when I had to write in a clause on a contract, I had to like literally research all the words and make sure it made sense and Google it all. Now it's like you go on ChatGPT and be like, write a clause for this with this and this. And in less than 5 seconds, you have a full standard clause, right? And it just helps, automate and speed up and make certain things more efficient on the back end, like you said, because there's still that face-to-face component, right? And
There's this, like, anything that is a service that would be charged in billable hours. I've
right.
found that you can upgrade the types of third parties you work with that are the best at what they do, that charge a high rate, because what they used to charge you 20 hours for, now you can do it in 4. So even if their bill rate is double what it was before, if you're only having to pay them for 4 hours instead of 20, you're
Yeah.
saving a bunch of money because you're doing some of that preparation up front. Right? If
Yeah.
you're drafting the lease yourself and it's already thought about ROFR clauses and wall demisements and insurance requirements and weather risk and hazard, and like all that stuff's already built in there. Now you send it off to an attorney that you trust or a title company you're working with. They can handle this stuff a lot faster, and you can negotiate a much lower rate or maybe even a fixed fee that then helps you understand what your cost is to operate a potential deal or to service a potential deal. And you get more certainty on the money you're going to make yourself, whether you're owner,
Yeah.
operator, investor, broker, advisor.
Yeah. And even just for like small businesses, it helps them so much too. Like even not necessarily in the investment or real estate space, but let's just talk about landscaping, you know what I mean? Or like trades, right? Like it helps these people, like, for example, and it sounds simple and it sounds insignificant, but invoicing softwares for someone who runs a landscaping business, a small landscaping business, right? And even if he makes, $200,000-300,000 a year of business, you no longer have to draft up invoices and estimations by hand. And it
Yeah.
sounds so like minute, but like you could actually, automate invoicing through certain softwares, which also in turn helps make the accounting and the bookkeeping more efficient, filing taxes at the end of the year less of a headache. You know what I mean? And I think that if you don't, learn to adapt to the technology, you kind of fall behind, no matter what space you're in. I mean, can you imagine a landscaper who owns a small business writing invoices and submissions and estimations by hand anymore? I can't. So there's definitely some people that still do up there in a certain age category for sure.
We had a pest control person come and do like a quarterly service at our single family home. And it was like a printed out checklist where he had written stuff in, and he gave us the old yellow carbon copy.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
asked him, like, hey, like, why are we still doing paper?
Yeah. Filing it must be such a headache at the end of the year.
It's like, owner's been doing this for 31 years. Technology scares him. And I was like, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I get it. But like, and it probably only took you 7 minutes,
Yeah.
right? To like fill this out, write it to me, have me sign it, rip it off. It's fine. But like, add that 7 minutes up, the 4 customers you serviced this morning.
Yeah.
Like
Time
that's an extra 30 minutes in your day. Do that every day. That's 2.5 hours of your life. That's an extra couple jobs you
Yeah.
could run that you could have charged for. And oh, by the way, on the back end, are you now manually entering all of this information into the system? And then your bookkeeper's having to pay taxes, close the books, like add all these hours up.
Yeah.
And it's not just that you're costing yourself more money in labor, but there's an opportunity cost in revenue that you're not getting. And oh, by the way, like what's your time worth just in general for your own sanity?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and again, it's like one of these things that no matter what business you're in, no matter what field you're in, and we just use the example of invoices, right? Something as small and as that people might think is insignificant could easily be automated and make it more efficient. And even like when we talk about invoicing softwares, there's a ton of them out there. You have the more expensive ones for sure, but you have the more affordable ones too. Like you could get certain softwares for under, $30 a month, invoicing and everything. And at the end of the year, it will save you a huge amount of hours, assuming that you enter the data correctly, expenses and everything, right? Will save you a huge amount of hours when it comes to tax season.
We ran into the corporate job that I have where I'm head of corp dev. We have about 110 employees. Maybe not quite half of them. About half of them have corporate cards just
Right.
for like various T&E. And I remember the big stink that got raised when we switched from like a corporate Amex where you were getting points to we use a company called Ramp, which automates all your expenses. And anytime you swipe that card, you get a text message. Ramp, hey, what's this for? Take a picture of the receipt right now. Enter in to respond to this text with the reason, the memo, and boom, you are done. That receipt can go in the trash. You don't need to save anything. You don't have to file reports later. It's all automated. In that first 2 months, there were a bunch of salespeople who were like, I don't get my points anymore. And then after like 2 months of like not having to file an expense report at the end of the month, they're like, you know what? I don't need the points.
Yeah.
I just thank you for giving me an hour and a half back of my time every month to not have to worry about this crap so I can go do other stuff.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm one of those person that's always trying to keep up with like the trends of technology and automation. And, I see some people like even in the real estate, coaching space, which we're in, the way they have their ads and their lead gen forms and their funnel set up, all that is done through AI, right? All that is done through AI, right? Funnels, sales funnels, marketing funnels, everything is literally done through AI. And back in the day, it was like CRM systems were like the way to get organized and you had to manually enter it. But now you can automate your AI tool with your CRM system or certain, like for example, we use a brand GHL Go High Level, which kind of has everything wrapped into one,
Yeah.
and it just makes it more efficient and easy to maneuver. I feel that because a lot of a part of the reason why people don't yield the results that they yield in any business that they do is because they're stuck navigating the storm of chaos, right? It's hard to, you go back to that guy with the carbon copies, right? Let's say you're doing 5 jobs a day and you're working 5 days a week, right? And that's 25 papers and invoices. But let's say that company has 5 exterminators on the road every day doing 5 jobs. That's 125 invoices a week to file, to manage, to keep, to document. No, you do that with AI, it's barely even noticeable, right?
Not only that, when you do things manually, I hate to harp on it, but like just there's a higher risk of just missing something. It
Right.
doesn't mean you're a bad employee or a bad boss. It just means like you're handling a lot of stuff, and sometimes life happens. Like you're at someone's house and you get distracted by a dog and you leave the carbon copy at the house, or you go to get lunch and you spill a drink on one of the papers, and like you're like, oh crap, and like you're trying to dry it off, and then you crumple it up, and you probably end up still getting paid for it. But like, when do you discover that? Is it a couple months later? Did you miss out on the payment anyway? And so sometimes just like the stress of having to do all that manually is just better left to technology. And that's the debate I've had to have with my wife, because she's an attorney and she still wants everything in papers, in
Right.
files, because she has a requirement multiple years after a case to keep all the files.
Yeah.
File.
Physical form too, not even digital, physical form. Yeah.
And like, I'm just hoping that goes away at some point, because there's digital storage that can have redundancy and be easily accessible by multiple devices and is password protected and all that, so that like we don't have this in
Yeah.
my, right?
Yeah.
Like triathlon bike, good. Filing
Yeah.
cabinets, big.
Yeah. 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 Man. And and going back to the paper thing, one of my personal favorite situations, and it's happened to me a couple of times, is I remember, I started off as a real estate agent, and 10 years ago, hard signatures were a thing. Electronic signatures were maybe just coming
Yeah.
in 2015, maybe just coming in, or like less regulated or less like approved and accepted, and signing a contract, or in the exterminator's case, an invoice, and then grabbing your file, your folder the wrong way from your car on a rainy day and having papers go everywhere on the floor. And it's happened to me 1 or 2 times, and now it's like, I don't even show up with paper because we sign contracts. We sign, even when we invest in properties, we're having a conversation like this. I got your number through a software that I use,
Yeah.
right? And I'm calling you and I'm like, we make an agreement, and I'm sending you a contract, a real estate purchase agreement through a software that you could sign, right? So, I mean, like,
And oh,
you
by
had,
the way, like 18 months later, you're out with a friend, maybe you're on the golf course, you're at a restaurant or something, and you run into an LP, and they're
yeah,
like, hey, how's that deal doing? And literally on your phone, you can pull up like recent stats and
report.
you answer the question right there, instead of being like, I need to go check this report that got printed out that we sent
Yeah,
last quarter. It's just being able to be adaptive and mobile and interact with people no matter where you are in the world and when you are in the world. That digital capability helps you manage a lot of those important relationships in your life, whether they're, direct clients or indirect partners. And just like, it can make you seem like you're just more on top of things than you actually are, because everything's at your fingertips.
100%. And it's so easily accessible. Like, even like, for example, my invoicing software, I have the app on my phone. So
Yeah.
I could just log in at any time and check my year-to-date statements, or check my, vendors agreements, or who hasn't paid who, and it's just so much more. I mean, like, even my car, to be honest with you, I could start my car from my phone,
Yeah.
from wherever I am, you know. Except yesterday,
Where's home for you? What part of the country you're in?
Montreal,
Okay,
Montreal.
so probably pretty chilly. So being able to start your car while you're still in your house or apartment,
Yeah,
let it
from the
warm,
app.
yeah, just from the app, boom, start, get the heater going, and then
Hmm.
by the time 8 minutes you step into the car, it's like no
Yeah,
problem. I have 3 young kids, so like all they do is
yeah,
complain about temperature. So like
yeah.
I definitely value that capability.
Yeah. Except once in a while, things like yesterday, what happened to me is I locked myself out of had my car key, my manette in my laptop bag that I put in the trunk, but I locked myself out of the car. And because I was parked on the third level of an underground parking, the app didn't have any reception. But then when I would go outside to get the reception, the car wouldn't get the signal. So I'm stuck downtown Montreal, trying to figure out what do I do, and I had to get an Uber to come to my house take my spare key to deliver it to me downtown so I could get into my car. That's the only time that like it sucks, but I mean, other than that, I think it's pretty neat, other than that. But so you mentioned you're in real estate investing. Tell me some of the ways that like softwares have helped your investment journey,
So the first thing, I'll kind of walk through it by stage, right? From getting the deals to underwriting them to executing them to managing them to selling them to raising capital to do more stuff, right? So at the beginning of the journey back in 19, no one was sending me deals because I wasn't on their radar as a potential investor.
Right.
This is way before AI. So it was just like I was meeting people at conferences and building the broker network and seeing what was out there. And just to level set on the portfolios, we have 2 single family homes. We have an interest in a self-storage facility. We have an LP interest in a multifamily apartment complex. And then we are a GP of 1 single tenant net lease retail assets. So one little standalone shop. So a bunch of different property investments. And so now I get a lot of deals sent my way from brokers I've met, or friends of mine in the community, people that have started their own funds. I'm probably getting between 5 and 10 deals every week. And I wouldn't have time to like actually go deep and evaluate them all with, my current job, my triathlon training, my kids, my wife, my friends. So what AI does is I basically have an email address that I provide to all the brokers and my friends that are GPs, and like, just send all the deals to this email address.
Right.
Just send them, and Claude is evaluating the attached circulars and embedded models. And I've already told it like what parameters are in my buy box for each property type and some deal breaker clauses that like if they're in there, just done, right? So when I'm done with work for the day, like Claude has already analyzed whether a deal that's been sent my way is actually worth me looking at and opening in the first place. And of the, say 5 to 10 deals I'm getting each week, 2 of those deals are worth looking at. And then I go and look at them. And if I get excited, I forward them on to other people that I'm friends with in the investor group. And then we go from there. So that's already saving me a ton of time. And I just don't have to look at deals. Not only that, Claude is drafting an email response if a deal didn't meet the buy box. So I usually need to go in and spend 30, 45 seconds editing it, but then I'm able to email back the broker or the advisor or the GP that sent me that deal. Be like, hey, here's why we're passing on the deal and what didn't meet our parameters. And if they're smart and they're using AI, they're updating their profiles in the CRM for me saying, Kevin doesn't do deals less than this number of units, or built before this year, or that hasn't gone on or whatever renovations, or you haven't done the expansion to see if we're going to have to redo the electrical if we buy it, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's super helpful. Then once we're actually negotiating the deal back and forth, right? AI is evaluating the LP agreement, the lease agreements when necessary. Oftentimes when I'm an LP, I don't really have power to negotiate, but at least gives me the visibility where I can bring this stuff up to the GP who's running the deal and say, are these really fair terms? And see whether they'll negotiate. Sometimes they won't because they won't have to. But at least allows us to have an accelerated conversation and not a lot of like red line back and forth BS, which is always slowing us down. And then once we're in a property, AI for level 1 customer support, I have found to be so much better than it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was like you had these chat bots, or some of it was voice, and it was like people would play games and mess with the AI because it wasn't very good. Fast forward to today, I've listened to recorded calls where like a tenant is literally flirting with
The AI bot.
AI agent, because like she's very convincing and very empathetic and very, very kind. And it's kind of hilarious to experience now, but like that's how good the AI has gotten. And so when you're a tenant and you're calling in for a potential issue, toilet's clogged, light bulb is out, something's wrong with the dishwasher, HVAC doesn't seem to be firing, I've put it on a timer, but it's not turning on time, whatever. AI is saying, totally get it, logging this issue. By the way, there's a maintenance tech in the building right now. I will ping him or her. Or, oh, by the way, we don't have anybody on site right now. They're in a different building and it looks like they're scheduled to be here in 3 hours. So in 3 hours, we will get to this issue. So that level 1 communication, just so a tenant feels heard,
Yeah.
It's amazing the difference it makes. We did some studies with some of my day jobs, larger clients. The reason that most tenants leave is not because like a work order or two take a long time to get solved, or because like they don't love the amenities in the building. It's they're not being heard. They don't feel like they are being listened to as a rent paying person or entity.
And I could tell you how that helps because I started a property management business
Mhm.
2018, and one common feedback I get is the manager does nothing, the manager does nothing. And at the beginning of my business, it'd be like, okay, the manager does nothing, great. But then like, could it be like the last 5 files that I onboarded, the manager does nothing, right? And then I became a manager and I hit a certain amount of doors, and it's like there's a small percentage of doors that will and service calls and maintenance requests that will take up all of your time, or urgencies and priorities. And then the other percentage of non-urgent, non-priority, and I'm talking like broken doorknob handles that like are still functional, but let's say a piece broke off, right? So aesthetically it's not pleasing.
Yeah.
It's one of these like things that doesn't fall into urgent or priority categories that kind of get left on the back burner and forgotten and then pile up. And the tenant's like, the manager does nothing, the manager does nothing. But meanwhile, it's because I'm, wrestling with the other 15 urgencies and priorities. So it
Yep.
totally helps with like that, and automation. And because the reality is in the real estate investment world, especially when you accumulate a certain amount of doors, like my property management business, we're over 300 doors. And we're a small team. We're a small
Yeah.
team. Two managers and a virtual assistant with obviously an extended team of like a maintenance technician who's third party but works exclusively with us
Yeah.
at another property management, and a leasing agent. The immediate team were an administrative assistant and two property managers. And 300 doors brings you a lot of like your doesn't seem like much compared to like the managers that do 500, 600, 1,000 doors, but it brings you a lot of like things to do, constantly do. And the issue is not the big things, because the big
Yeah.
things always get done. It's, in my experience, it's always the little things, the little calls where are not important, are not priority. And, they build up, and next thing you know, you have 15, 20 little tasks to do that might only take 30, 45 minutes to do. For the maintenance tech, they fall behind, right?
Have you, now that you're 8 years into it, have you gotten to the point, especially with AI, where you're like, okay, I think we can get to 350 doors and then we got to hire the next person? Have you figured out like where the inflection point is?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that I even forget about like now the 300 somewhat doors. There was a point in time where, because originally I had started this, I became a real estate broker, and then I had started this kind of as like a side thing where I was
Yeah.
selling to people who wanted to invest. And then they were constantly asking me questions about how do I rent, how do I do credit checks, how do I manage. So I kind of started as like a side hustle, and then it kind of just, because it's management, it kind of wraps all in one with sales. So it's so hard for me to like divide the two.
Yeah.
But there was a point in time where, I got to 50 doors and I was like, okay, I need to add this. And then when I hit, and every once in a while there's plateaus, and the first plateau was 50, where I was like, okay, I need to add this. And then at 100, it was, okay, I need to add auto attendant phone line. And then, okay, I need to add an email man. You know what I mean? So we always come to points where we know we need to add. And even, for example, with like softwares, first of all, there's a ton of management softwares out there. It's just a matter of, and they're all priced differently and they're all do special features, but it's just a matter of what you need. And even when it comes to softwares, there was a point where like, yeah, we know we need that software, but not quite at 50 doors. At 300 doors, yeah, it makes more sense. But at 150 doors, we could still do it this way, right? So there's always these points, right? And no matter what business you're in, there's
Yeah.
always going to be those plateaus.
We've also found the issue of like interoperability becomes really, really important as your door count or your building count or whatever client count, however you're measuring,
Yeah.
goes up. Because when you're managing accounting on QuickBooks, that's fine. And if you're managing marketing tours and leasing visits and LOIs on HubSpot, also fine. But if like HubSpot and QuickBooks ain't talking to each other.
Yeah,
Well,
not fun.
now it's a problem because you're having to do all this double work. Okay, well now they're entering in the lease. We got to enter the new lease agreement. We have to send out the invoice. We have to set up the billing and collections. We have to do the credit check, and you're doing it in all these different places. And so you're re-entering all the same data about a potential tenant or investor. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's got to be a better way. And so sometimes now, especially today, now that a lot of these systems are talking to each other and they have APIs and plugins, and you can just basically port data from one system to another, that has become much better, much easier.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's the great thing about AI, just making everything so much more efficient and streamlining the process,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a lot of things that take time but don't necessarily make money, but absolutely need to be done.
We like to say sometimes like that, like little, like the light touch, right?
Yeah.
Things that seem small, those might not win you a new deal or get you a bunch of extra money, but they protect a
Right.
lot of potential loss of money.
Yeah.
The downside protection is super important, not just the win on the new stuff. You have to keep happy all the people you sold in the past.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. So, I mean, being in the business and having over a 20-year career and just being technology conscious, I'll say, how do you see it evolving, or like, where do you see this going in the next 5 to 10 years?
I just think everything is going to be more and more digital and more automated. And it's not a question of whether the technology will be able to do the things you want it to do. Will it be with a user experience that makes you trust the result? Like right now, we ask a lot of questions of AI and it spits back an answer. And we're like, is that a real source I can trust? Is
Yeah.
it cited? Is it legit? Are these numbers accurate? But I now like no longer use Google search. I use Gemini when I want to
Yeah.
research. But I haven't gone to like Chrome and like searched for something since the beginning of the year. I
Yeah.
think we're going to go more and more that direction. We are going to rely more and more on digital agents to do more and more things for us. And that's not to say like that's an excuse to not become a resilient person. You still need to be an active listener when you're out in the world. You still need to, have respect for people and learn how to detect BS. I think that's going to be one of the biggest skills we need as business owners and as teachers and parents, because you're going to be fed, quite frankly, a lot of information that might seem legit, but it's complete BS. So just having that BS detector is going to be super, super important as technology continues to improve. But I think we will get to the point where more and more things we don't really enjoy doing, if we're honest with ourselves, that seem redundant and seem minutia, we won't have to do that stuff anymore.
No.
And then we'll have to decide, well, what do we do with that extra time? Do
Yeah.
we use it more for leisure? Do we use it to make more money? Do we use it to invest in ourselves and our friends and our colleagues, direct reports? Do we invest it in our family and our kids? Like they're going to be good problems to have, I think. So we're also going to have to confront the reality that, look, a lot of entry level jobs are going away.
Oh yeah.
And it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen fast. It will happen slowly and then fast.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have to confront the political fallout of that. What will that mean for young people?
I mean, I'll give you a great example. You mentioned it earlier, factory work. How many lines workers' jobs have been replaced by machines? Not even AI, machines that can, package wrap even just let's just say peanut butter containers, right? Before, back in the day, it used to be a conveyor belt and a guy with the stickers and then some pressure. And now it's all done through machines, right? And so just something as simple like that, right? And tons of people lost their jobs as linesmen when those, I don't want to call them robots, but machines came in, which ultimately saves the company money. You know what I mean? And so like just that was just the beginning of it. And it's going to get more and more and more advanced.
Yeah, I wonder if like revolution is too strong of a word, but like I think a lot of the hollowing out of these factories because of automation and robots, at least in America, that definitely led to more populist politicians on both sides of the aisle winning a lot of support. You saw Bernie Sanders on the left, you saw Trump on the right.
Yeah.
Just imagine now what's going to happen as this technology is now hitting professionals. So
Yeah.
if you only need half the number of entry-level attorneys, entry-level accountants, entry-level actuaries, entry-level brokers, like things that like now like require a college degree and a lot of investment and a lot of debt. Like what's going to happen in the 2028 election when a lot of these people that are now new voters
Yeah.
are like struggling to get jobs, struggling to get paid, and they're going to have opinions about that. And so I don't know what the fallout's going to be. There's a lot to be excited about with technology, but there's also a lot that we need to keep in mind for the sociological realities of life.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. But like I said, for those who understand it, I look at someone like my father who is old school and, has a hard time even navigating through a cell phone text message, right? Gets by, but has a hard time. Can't tell you the difference between iMessage and WhatsApp, let's say, but there's a handful of these people, but then there's, people who are always trying to understand it. Some understand it better than others, and some, don't. But those who understand they need to keep up, will always make an advantage of it. For example, the exterminating company, great example. It's a hell of a lot of carbon copies to file if you break it down the way we did, right? But if you're using a simple invoicing software that costs, I could tell you my invoicing software cost me $26 a month Canadian. At the end, and it does what I need it to do, and it does what I need it to do. And at the end of the year, it doesn't even cost me, you know what I mean, $500, right? So there's no excuse. There's no excuse. It's just a matter of, finding what works for you, and you don't always need to be, right, the king of technology and understand it or the smartest, but you need to utilize it to a certain degree,
Yeah.
for your own sake and time's sake, right?
And I don't think there's any fault in people that try something and it doesn't work out well the first time and they learn something, and like, look, failing fast is okay.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you got to be perfect with tech the first time. I'm definitely not. And I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah. And we're always learning. No matter how much you know about it, no matter how much you don't know, no matter how long you're doing it, you're always learning because you need to. Longevity counts on basically keeping up with the evolution of the systems, the business, and whatever field you're in.
Not only that, you need to keep your brain engaged. If you feel like you're not challenged and you're bored, like I see a lot of people that just, they retire and then they degrade mentally and physically because they don't continue challenging their bodies and
Themselves.
their
Yeah.
bodies. And so if for any of you out there that are a little bit hesitant to embrace some of this new technology for fear of what it would do, think of it just as a good mental challenge exercise for your brain, just to keep you engaged and learning new stuff. There are health benefits to doing that.
Yeah, 100%. Use it or you'll lose it. So, I mean, listen, thanks for sitting down, man, and chatting today. It was an awesome conversation. But for anyone listening who could relate to you and maybe wants to get in touch, how could they reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best way. Just find me, Kevin Stoffman, on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people. I love talking with people there. It's really the only social network I'm really on, which I know I need to get with the times and have a better digital footprint if I want to grow my business. But for now, like, LinkedIn is the place where you can find me.
Amazing. Well, man, thanks again for sitting down with me today, and I appreciate your time. And for anyone listening, wherever you're listening, be sure to like, follow, comment, or subscribe. Until next time, guys, we'll see you again. Awesome.